The way college football playoffs are built right now, I love that there's 12 teams. I like the parity. I like Boise State getting an opportunity. I like Arizona State being in. I love that there's 12 teams. The problem I have with it is the first round is home games. It's home games for not the top 4 seeds. I don't agree with that. If you're Boise State and you get a home game, how much money is that actually coming into your program? Versus Texas got a home game. Penn State got a home game. Ohio State got a home game. Notre Dame got a home game. Arizona State didn't get a home game when I believe that they should have. I think what it should be is the first round should actually be bowl games. What they're doing in round 2 should be round 1. Round 2 should be home games for those first 4 seeds. That's just my opinion. I'm a little hot-headed about it because like Boise State should have gotten a home game. They were the number 2, number 3 seed. They should have gotten a home game. I don't know.
No, go ahead, Jace.
I think you get rid of all the first round buys altogether. I think you just get rid of those and you keep teams. You got 1 playing 12, 2 playing 11. You run it that way. The other thing that I have an issue with is the group of 5 champion should automatically be the number 5 seed. I don't think, and maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a guy that, has grown up cheering for a Power 4 team my whole life, or now Power 4 used to be Power 5. But I think that the group of 5 champion, because originally when they announced it, the group of 5 champion was the number 5 seed. And then people decided that Boise should be a higher seed. So I think you keep the top 4 teams as the Power 4 conference champions, and then you make the group of 5 champion the 5 seed, or you run it like the NCAA tournament and give every conference champion an automatic bid, and then you have like 2 wildcard teams. I think there's a lot that needs to be changed, but I think the first thing that they need to change is get rid of the first round bye thing.
Well, it didn't go well.
No
team that had a first round bye is still playing, and they're all the highest ranked teams. Like, how does that make any sense?
Sure, shout that out right away.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot. Now, granted, this was the first year. This was a test run, I guess you can call it. I felt like there should have been a little bit more thought into it, which is why I'm all for Pat McAfee and all those guys saying, they're chanting for Nick Saban to be the commissioner of this thing and just to like make it a thing. And I couldn't agree more. I think Nick Saban is 100% a person that should at least be involved. If he's not the top dog, at least involved. He's going to bring a little bit more of the old school, but also, that's kind of the other part. The way the playoffs are set up right now, it's built for success for certain teams. I also agree. I think group of 5 winner should probably be the number 5, unless they can get a strength of schedule ahead of I don't know, a top 10 or whatever. You can hold a threshold on that. But I also, and I know this is gonna sting for some fans that are hellbent on it, but I don't really care for the championships of each conference. I think that those are just games where guys can get hurt and guys can lose, not going to the college football playoff because they lost a game. Clemson won and barely got in, and then some other teams lost and didn't get in. I don't necessarily think a conference championship is the end all be all. I think there's got to be a way to mitigate that problem, right? Like, especially in like Boise State standards, where you can maybe create like a tier system where you have your group of 5, but like your top tier group of 5, where they have to play X amount of games against Power 4 teams, and kind of reroute that. I'm not sure where they're going to go with it, but it definitely needs to go in a different direction than where it is right now.
I mean, when you look at Boise State and their resume too, like their best game they played was Oregon. And then we saw that Oregon clearly was not that when they played Ohio State. Not only that, but their best win was UNLV. Now, Lindsey, Joel, you guys have more experience. Obviously, Lindsey working at NAU and Joel, you playing at Charleston Southern with the FCS. Is there a way, do you think, the FBS could copy kind of the playoff system that the FCS has?
Good.
I mean, I think yes and no. I mean, the FCS is just like, I was just explaining this to my brother last night because he didn't even know there was a difference. And I was like explaining to him, my mom, and I was like, NAU, we were watching the championship last night, and I was like, NAU's an FCS, right? And I was like, then you look at, whatever. My dad went to Fresno State, so we always use Fresno State. And I mean, I just think it's like a little softer the way they do things. I don't know if I necessarily like would want FBS to copy what FCS does, because it kind of reminds me like I feel like FCS is kind of treated like the stepchild of Division I football, and I don't necessarily think it should be like that, because these guys, I mean, I've worked with NAU for 5 years now, but I know players that have gone on to play at Washington, at Boise, at ASU, U of A, like they work just as hard as these guys, but they're not recognized the same way. And so I don't know if I'd want, my opinion to the commissioners mean nothing, but for them to copy what FCS does, because if anything, I think FCS should be treated the way FBS is.
I agree. Speaking of which, I did see that I hawk the 247 Sports transfer portal, and I did see the young man from NAU. He's a safety. He's going to UW, right?
Yeah, Colby Humphrey.
That's right. Yep, I did. I remember seeing an NAU guy head over there, so he must be pretty good. That's awesome.
Crazy talented. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Was he Hamilton High School? Was he Hamilton High School? I think I ended up looking him up, and I think he was.
I think he is. I know he's a local. Yeah. I know he's a local kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Joel, you played at the FCS level. How did it differ when you played other FCS teams, and when you kind of made any form of a postseason run versus seeing some of these teams in the FBS level and seeing this now system set up?
Good question, man. I would say obviously the power of resources is different. I could always tell, as we would go play the FBS schools, it's just the hype around it, everything that they would do, there's so much ceremony to it. And in my experience, when I was playing FCS, there's just not as much. And so just honestly, the amount of attention that's on it makes a difference too. I feel like the games were exciting. We all of us that were in FCS, we were tracking down what was going on in the playoffs. We would pick on each other. There were players that we play against, and we see their teams, going down and figuring things out. But clearly there was a difference. To give a little bit of an example, when we played way back when we played Florida, the night before, even just like what they would eat for pregame and like where they would stay in hotel, night and day. Obviously you could feel that difference when you're going out to play these teams. I mean, it's expected. It's a money game. But I will say, just in terms of structure, the playoffs, I'm trying to think of, and you guys feel free to correct me, the amount of rounds that SES does in comparison to what they're doing now with FBS. The difference, help me out with the numbers. What is that exactly again? I'm trying to think off the top of my head the amount of games.
So it's 16, which is 4 at the FCS level, and then there's 12, which converts to 3 if you're in the bottom half, and then 2. Actually, no, sorry. It is 4, actually.
4 and 3, yeah.
Yeah, 4 and 3. My apologies. 4 and 3 if you're set up in the back half, and then if you're the top 4 seed, it's 3 to the top. But yeah.
I know it sounds weird, but it's more possible when we're in the FCS. It seemed more possible to have a team that maybe during the season didn't have all the sparkle. You didn't have like high flying receivers or start cravey, DBs or ends or what have you. But as long as the team was like constructed well and actually worked and functioned well as a team, they would get down the road. Like, as long as they can get into the playoffs, you can see it happening. Where so far, what I'm seeing right now with the FBS is like the difference from what it was with BCS. Like, I don't get that feeling of like, oh, there's a chance. I mean, maybe that's just my perspective, but it just doesn't feel that way as you're going.
The parity level.
Yeah,
it's the parity level. Yeah,
they figure it out. They play their best. There's a chance that they could win. Maybe it's 2 times out of 10 kind of situation, but it doesn't feel that way so far for me with what they're doing with the.
You mentioned playing Florida. I don't know if everybody here got to see the picture. Did you end up getting the sack on Tim Tebow?
I did not. No,
he did not. There's a really quality picture of Joel hunting him down, and he was probably like 5 feet away. And of course, Tim Tebow's quick release. He's going to get rid of that ball. But
I don't even think he looked at it. Yeah.
Well, and kind of staying on the same topic, in your era, playing in the South at Charleston Southern, who was kind of the top dog back then? I know, like, you got the North Dakota States, you got the South Dakota States, Montana States. Those are the powerhouses of the 2010s plus. Back around then, who was kind of the king of the South?
Oh, good question. I always throw this team in. I don't know if they count as the South. I would say maybe because I was like, oh, they're awesome. We're all together. Richmond,
Richmond,
another one. Yeah, that was always toted high. Coastal they were usually in contention. Coastal Carolina. I'm trying to think. No, those they did not do as well. Sometimes Gardner Webb. Oh my goodness! I'm trying to think of any others in the South. So like, because you thought the others are all more Midwest, like you said, Montana, both North and South Dakota. Always been even back then. I say back then. You guys probably know this. It's been a long time since I played. It was I graduated 2011, so. It's been a minute. So whether I should admit that. Other teams. I mean, within our conference, consistently. I mean, there was teams that would function well, but in terms of playoffs, for some reason, I'm trying to grasp for straws, and I can't recall ones that were phenomenal in the South. I mean, there was plenty. There was a lot of competition in that conference, but directly in the playoffs, I can't recall. I could think of NAU. They were constantly either in the playoffs or going back and forth. Right? I was like,
I mean, they're definitely an up and coming program, but they haven't always been. I'm a proud lumberjack, but they have not always been that good. So,
do you happen to know how many players they lost or what their coaching situation? Did they lose any head coaches this year? Is there any turnover?
So they lost their head coach last season at the end of his contract, and they lost. I want to say they lost like 60% of their roster when their head coach left. I mean, they bolted out of there because they didn't hire a coach for a couple weeks. It was really like unknown. This
team that made it to the postseason for the first time in quite some time, that was a 60% new roster.
Mm-hmm.
Holy smokes. Good for them.
This is huge. From Pitt. Yeah. He came from Pitt and brought 50% of his roster with him. And then he got in season ended in November. He got in, I would say, end of December, early January. And one thing NAU is good at is recruiting kids from Tempe that, it's your lifelong dream to play at ASU. ASU recruits heavily from Texas. So NAU's catch is they recruit from Tempe and like the Phoenix area. So they came and recruited a ton of kids and they had a great season.
And that's honestly where NAU can really factor in. Until GCU gets a football program, right? NAU is going to continue getting, if they just keep going down to Tempe and just taking the Valley kids. I mean, they're going to continue.
And all their teams, their teams are heavily weighted Phoenix kids. Like even down like basketball. I mean, like Tommy Lloyd's son played for a while, and like they're from Washington, but he was living in Tucson, and they recruited him, and he came up after he played at GCU, and like, I mean. It's creates a fan base down in the Valley, but there's not really a fan base otherwise. But
hey, speaking of wild, go ahead, Jace.
Another thing I noticed with NAU is they like to recruit D2 guys. Those guys that don't get really a lot of looks from those D1 schools. I know I have a former teammate of mine that's at NAU that played at Western Colorado, and he transferred to NAU. You see a lot of those guys that are the D2 guys that could play at the D1 level, but they go D2 because maybe it's A, closer to home, or B, cheaper, and then they get that opportunity to show out a little bit at the college level and then make that transfer move to the FCS D1, or even we've seen a couple times the FBS level too. I think that's another thing NAU does really well is recruit D2.
Yeah, and I think what's cool too, like being at an FCS school, is it's not as big a deal when you transfer from like even a same like conference school. Like there were so many players that came from like Northern Colorado, Montana State, Sac State, and it's just not as big a deal as going from like Arizona to Arizona State or like anything like that, because it's just a little more mellow that way. It's like it's not like this huge competition. So I think it draws in a lot more of like that transfer portal, A, and then B, like it's just more, it feels more community to me. And I mean, I'm more used to FCS.
Yeah, and kind of touching on that a little bit, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but Sac State is raiding the portal with great players. And after seeing, this is just me speculating here, but NIU to the Mountain West, that's, I guess, a done deal now. Does Sac State now have a chance to go to the Pac-12? Because I've heard rumors in the past that Sac State, it's a big location. Obviously, Sacramento's not a small town. Sac State's, it's the facilities I've seen. I've been there. They're not impressive, especially football wise. But if they join the Pac and they get Pac-12 money, can they make those upgrades? Or is there a downtown stadium that I don't know about that they can maybe play their home games there? See, and Lindsay's on the scene. You know this one better than anybody.
I mean, yeah, like my parents live in Sacramento. Like I was there this morning. I just got back to Arizona. So, I mean, there's not a stadium, like that's for sure. There's no room in Sacramento. There is with the Giants. The A's now coming to play where the Giants minor league team plays. There's no room. But I've heard that they're going to upgrade their facilities. And from what I've heard from a couple like people I know and like a couple players is like that's the goal, is to go to the Pac-12. Do I see them going to the Pac-12? No. I just think like also it's like maybe don't go where like everyone, I mean, I don't know, Fresno State is in the Pac-12 now and like all that, and it's great, but I think they're in a competitive system where they are, but I know they're dying to move up to FBS.
Yeah, I did notice they have a track. And when you see that, you always wonder, okay, if they took away the track, if they have the money, right? It starts there. If they have the money to make these facility upgrades, can they get rid of the track and actually add in a bowl, or at least a 3/4 bowl, the horseshoe like Ohio State, and have something along those lines, and at least get to like 20,000. My take on it is, if Montana wanted to join the Pac-12, I'd be all for it. I would love to have Montana and Montana State, and they only have, I think, 20 to 25,000 seats. I think that's where they're capped at right now, until they do any more facility upgrades. If Sac State can get in that neighborhood, I mean, it's a big enough location. It's a California school. It adds flavor to the Pac-12. And yeah, I want to say their student population is probably pretty impressive, probably 20,000 plus.
It's pretty high. It's pretty high up there. But the thing with Montana and Montana State is they bring their fans.
That's true.
They've got some committed fans.
They travel well, especially up there. Granted, in Montana, there's not a lot else to do. It's kind of like Nebraska. Yeah. Nebraska has 100,000 fans at every home game, because what else are you going to do in Lincoln, Nebraska? Go look at cornfields? You're not going to do anything else other than go watch a football game on a Saturday.
If you didn't know, Jace is a Colorado fan, and he will always put down Nebraska whenever he gets the opportunity to.
I get the chance. I saw the door open. I'm sorry, but like another school like that. You're talking about Montana State, is North Dakota State and South Dakota State, with how much they've been dominant at the FCS level. Granted, those two schools, I mean, Colorado almost screwed around and found out. North Dakota State, like, they came into Boulder and we only beat them by 6. And the thing with that is those are two schools I think they would add a ton more flavor to the Pac-12. The whole Pac-12 situation right now, taking the Mountain West schools, it's a whole mess. The Mountain West and the Pac-12 transitions that they're making right now is a mess. I mean, GCU is headed to the Mountain West. You're seeing, as you said, NIU is headed to the Mountain West. And granted, the whole conference realignment's a mess as is. I mean, you got Cincinnati in the Big 12 and, freaking UCF in the Big 12. Like, that makes absolutely no sense to me, but that's a topic for another time. But the thing you're seeing with the Pac-12 is they've traditionally been the West Coast, right? Yeah. But if you add North and South Dakota State, two programs that have traditionally dominated the FCS level, we've seen it with James Madison. That can add a ton of flavor and a ton more fun to the Pac-12, especially with schools like Boise being nearby.
Yeah.
Well, and the Pac-12 is so iconic. Like, the Pac-12 is so iconic. Like, And I think when it dissolved last year, everyone was like this is like, I was working for a Pac-12 team at the time and everyone was devastated, and I didn't understand why, because it was my first season. And now that Arizona State's in the Big 12 and working this season with them, it was like, oh, we missed the Pac-12. I was like, I like, and it's, but like now, like to have a whole new Pac-12, I just don't know if it's going to be what they want it to be. Because it was kind of cool, like how it was all like the West Coast schools, and like, it was just always, you always knew where you were going. Like, you know, like it's just such a comfortability thing. Big 12, like you said, Jace, like ASU had to go to Cincinnati. They had to go to West Virginia, UCF. And it's just like, your school's in Tempe, Arizona, and you're flying to like Florida. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, and we saw that with the Big Ten with Oregon and Washington. I mean, Washington had to go to Rutgers in New Jersey. Yeah. That's literally across the freaking world almost, in a sense. And the other thing is, Gavin, I know you're a Wazoo guy. I know that, you grew up Pac-12. As a Colorado fan, we were happy to go back to the Big 12, but nonetheless, the Pac-12, a lot of people are thinking, oh, the Pac-12, they come back, it's a Power 5. It's not. We're not going to have them as a Power 5 until we start to see the Pac-12 absolutely dominate the other Power 4s. Once they start to do that, then they become a Power 5. They're going to be a group. It'll be the group of 6 once we get the Pac-12 back.
Yeah, and Boise State's that's the one in the right direction, right? Like that's the one that's like, okay, there's a national powerhouse. But yeah, and to be honest, to kind of dig a little deeper on that one, I'm frustrated with our school and what they've done, and the current president. I have no problem saying this out loud. The current president has done just a terrible job. He was the one that didn't even want to sue the Pac-12 to try and get the money back. We would have had no money to try and restart the Pac-12. And yeah, it was ridiculous. The Board of Regents had to kind of shake on him and say, hey man, we need to do this. The Oregon State president was like, hey, yeah, we're doing this. And he is retiring at the end of this year. I wish he would retire today. It's one of those things where he has just done such a terrible job. The funding is terrible. We have multiple millionaires that are alumni, and we can't scrounge up money. I don't get it. So Wazoo's got its own problems, and hopefully they figure that out. Hopefully they are able to muster up something. I mean, you got a basketball coach. I know, I don't pay attention to basketball all that much, but I do pay attention to Wazoo basketball. We've got 8 players right now. 8. Mm-hmm. That's it.
I just saw that on Twitter.
Yeah. 8 players with, I believe they held some tryouts. I don't know if they have or not. That was just kind of speculation, but I think they have a couple walk-ons that are just students there, because we have that many players that are injured and they're still 13-3. And it's just like, how do you not extend the guy? He's gone through all the adversity. He only has 8 players, and we're not giving him money. It's wild to me. And then the head coach that we just got from San Diego State, from South Dakota State, Jimmy Rogers, we nixed his pay by $1 million. Jake Dicker was making 2.7. Now he's making I think it's 1.7 or 1.5.
That was a great hire by Wazoo. Honestly, I don't think that.
Yeah.
And, I'd mentioned the assistant coach, I think, of South Dakota State coming in for the DC job.
You did.
I don't think there was a better hire out there, outside of that South Dakota State. Well, remind me his name real quick. Help me out. Sorry, I drew
South Dakota. Jimmy Rogers.
Yeah, I think Rogers was the best hire. But like Wazoo, when the whole Pac-12 dissolved. And obviously, the first ones to do it were USC and UCLA, because they're the Cali schools. They think they're all high and mighty. How'd that Big Ten taste this year, you two schools? But we'll leave that alone for now. They're hurting.
They're hurting. No one's going to the games. And Stanford.
That graph. Mess around, find out. Day up here. Okay, they messed around too much and found out. And I think I was really surprised when Wazoo didn't jump ship at least to try and make a move towards the Big 12 at the minimum. Oregon State was the same way. I knew that the Big 10 wasn't going to take those 2 schools. No, but the ACC for crying out, the ACC for crying out loud took Stanford and Cal, who last time Stanford was relevant, I'm pretty sure Christian McCaffrey was still there, or maybe Bryce Love was there. But like they took those two schools.
Era.
Why didn't Oregon State and Washington State, I think, go ACC? I think that whole thing is just a question mark in my mind.
I think they were good, but not good enough in any category. Oregon State has won national championships in baseball. And some of these ACC, even though they're really good at baseball, I don't think they cared that much about baseball. Big 12, not really. It's mainly SEC when it comes down to baseball. And then there's just your hit and miss programs after that. And so that's kind of where they fell out. Also the markets, Eugene being bigger than Corvallis is bigger than Pullman. If you're not taking Oregon State, you're not taking Washington State. And I think the Big 12 saw that too. I think they probably had them in the back pocket. Like, oh, we have them if we want them, but we don't want them.
They don't want them.
They don't want them.
Well,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
What's such a bummer about the Pac-12 breaking up is like it broke up all the rivalries. Like, yes, the rivalries are still going. And like Oregon State and Oregon still play each other every year, but they don't play each other on Thanksgiving weekend like they have for like ever, right? I live with an Oregon State alumni. My sister goes to Oregon State. Like they don't shut up about that game. And it was like in the middle of September this year. And everyone was like, this is stupid. And I was like, yeah. Like we always start or end our season playing Arizona. Thank goodness that's how it worked out. But they told us, and they're like, there's no promises. And it's like, and it's also like as a Pac-12 school, you've gotten special treatment being in Pac-12 all these years. And now you're like the underdog. And I think it kind of slapped the Big 12 schools in the face a little bit. But like all these rivalries like are gone. Like, yeah, they took Stanford and Cal because they're like regional rivals. But it's like they don't have anyone.
Yeah. I think the Pac-12 rivalries that I think actually what I think, you know, they always talked about the Pac-12 isn't this strong of a conference, this, that, and the third. But then you have Oregon come in and absolutely dominate the Big Ten. Granted, that didn't work out for them in the playoff, but, you know, whatever. Then you have Arizona State and Colorado come in. They play really well in the Big Ten. But then you have the schools like Utah and USC and UCLA who didn't, and Stanford and Cal, who didn't exactly recruit to be ready for the conference. That's one of the things that really people are talking about with Texas. Your recruiting philosophy now has to change from what you were in the Pac-12. Sorry, but you're not going to beat Pac-12 teams by running the football 5 times a game. Or Big 12 teams, sorry. You're just not going to do it. Big 10's the same way. It's ground and pound, run it down their throat. And Texas, Steve Sarkisian, who came from Alabama, did a phenomenal job of recruiting that. Kenny Dillingham did a phenomenal job of recruiting guys that were ready for the Big 12. Oregon. They're going to get those guys anyways. They're Oregon. They have the Phil Knight backing. They're going to get those guys regardless. But USC, UCLA, Utah, Kyle Whittingham, great recruiter, but didn't recruit for the Big 12. He recruited for the Pac-12, and you're going to see that change over the coming years as well.
Yeah. Kind of wanted to shift gears. I know we had gotten off on a tangent there. I love talking college football and the state of it right now. Shifting gears to the NIL talk. I kind of want to throw it to Joel just because we haven't heard too much from you. So I wanted to throw it to Joel. Joel, the current state of the NIL. I actually pulled up some numbers right now just so we can have something to reference. So average quarterbacks are making 500 to 800 grand. Like that's the market. Obviously, John Mateer left Wazoo, goes to Oklahoma. He's making north of $3 million. Cam Ward year before, I think he went to Miami, made north of 1.5 million, something to that effect. With where it's at, with these players hopping and skipping and jumping and wherever they can get the biggest buck, which I am all for. I want these players to get paid because they can get hurt tomorrow and never play in the NFL. Yep. What is your thought and your take on that?
Exactly what you just finished with, quite honestly. Not only can they become injured in any of these games, and it seems like there's just more and more games every year, but they can get injured in practice. It constantly happens, obviously, especially in football, in college football. You're competing, within your own room, within your own house. and then you're going out there and competing with other teams. And the bigger the schools are, the more competition. I mean, even from, at least in my experience, and I don't know how much this carries. Obviously, it's different now in the state of Arizona, but those that would come into JUCO, to junior college, the competition was fierce. I mean, people were left and right, off season into going into playing season, trying to make sure they can keep their spot. And so I loved it. I remember when it was starting to be talked about, like back in my day, when they were starting to talk about the potential with the fiasco with NCAA being sued, hey, what's going to happen? And I was stoked. I was like, I think what's going to happen is that the top players are going to be spread out far more, rightfully so. They're going to say, oh, I need to traditionally go to the Alabamas. I need to go, to specifically SEC schools with the top speed and height and weight. But let me try and see what's going on over here with the HBCU. Let me see what's going on with the SCS. If I'm guaranteed playing time versus having to battle, and I can get sponsorship, I can get paid while I'm going through and wrecking my body. Take advantage of it. I'm clearly biased on this, but I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I wish I could reverse back time. Like, hey, let's start it down,
And that's why I wanted your take. Now, back then, also, guys are getting paid under the table. You hear about it all the time, but you never can prove it. Was that happening at Charleston? Well, I don't want to put anybody out at Charleston Southern, but did that happen? Then did you happen to see it?
You know what? If it was happening, then I missed out. Because not to toot my horn, I will say way back as I was coming out, I did not get recruited out of high school. Moved a whole bunch, and then I had to prove myself. Walked on to the community college, but I changed position. And at the year when I did it, I was the top in my position at that time. So it was very interesting going from nobody knows who you are. Like all of a sudden head coaches coming to visit me, and they would make comments. So there was things that were being said, but what they would use, and I don't know, I'm trying to think back to who the head coach was back when, so I feel like I can still say this because I don't remember his name, but places like Stephen F. Austin, when they came, right, FCS, at that time, they were doing really well. He was like, you'll come into town, it's not a big town, but they'll treat you like a god. He's like, your locker's gonna be set up all wood. You'll have your name spattered across it. But those were the things that they were toting, right? Like they were talking about, like, hey, you can be guaranteed to get your jersey number. You can, you go to local food spots. They'll know who you are. They wouldn't say like you're not gonna have to pay, but you feel it. You're like, oh, come visit, sit down. We'll take some pictures. We'll put it on the wall. Like Joel was eating here, not me, but I'm saying like just, an example. So those things may or may not have been mentioned, but there was none of that. Like, oh, hey, you go over here. Here, go speak to this booster, and then come back and let us know how that conversation went. Like there was none of that, at least in my experience and the folks that I knew at FCS level. I don't know if that changed a little bit before the time of NIL. But yeah, it's a little more, it's more the pizzazz of just, hey, here's the facilities, here's the normal stuff, in terms of recruitment. And then the slight mentions at times of things that were around town. Like, hey, just make sure, we're really close to this company, we're really close to that company. Go check them out. Go see. They might want to, do a photo op. Like, we're going to volunteer at this one place, and then you're going to sit there and you're going to interview within their facility. Like, it works out for the school. It's going to work out for you. And like, if you ever want to visit them, anytime, go. That was more of it, but no sleight of hand tricks with cash, in my experience. So
that and I appreciate that. That's what we wanted to hear, because I mean, I played baseball at New Mexico Highlands. You get negative money for playing there. Speaking of which, coming from smaller schools, NIL at the smaller schools, I kind of wanted to touch on that topic as well. Lindsay being at NAU, Jace obviously being at Highlands, is there any form of NIL fund, any collective that's trying to get something together? Obviously Highlands might be a little less than NAU if there's anything going on, but just curious on what that take and what that looks like at the smaller school level. Is it like, hey, we got $50,000, let's spread it amongst 50 people?
Jace, you look like you got a better answer than I do. So
He's trying to hold it.
I'm trying. I mean, so
Off the
obviously,
record.
before I got into the whole sports media world, I was an athlete myself, and I had a YouTube channel, still do, that whole 9 yards, right? When I all of a sudden was contacted by Barstool Sports to become a Barstool athlete, I went into our athletic director at the time's office and was like, "Hey, how does this affect my scholarship?" And he looked at me and said, "What is NIL?" And I'm kind of like, "Yo, this has been here for a year, my guy. Like, this has been here for a minute. Like, what do you mean? What is, like, aren't you the athletic director? Like, you should know this stuff." Some schools, now obviously being in the media world, being in sports information, I talk to a lot of other people at other schools. It really just depends. It depends on where you're located. The Texas schools, they have it because of the oil and gas. I feel like they capitalize off of that a ton, right? I feel like some schools down south, they capitalize off of, once again, the oil and gas industry a ton. It really depends on your location at least at the Division 2 and Division 3 level. Division 3 level, NIL doesn't exist because the Division 3 level is all more academic based rather than athletics based. They could give two craps less who you are at the Division 3 level. You got A's? That's all they care about. I think that while NIL helped smaller sports such as lacrosse or schools like baseball, I think you were able to see athletes, and the one that I really like to draw to and like to look at is the Cavender twins. If you don't know who they are, during the COVID year, they were at Fresno State. They then transferred to Miami, and they have made a huge name for themselves in the NIL world. You were able to see athletes build this brand name off of their name in sports that aren't looked at as big as, say, as football or basketball, men's basketball specifically. I think it has helped smaller sports, but has not helped smaller schools. The NIL world hasn't. I'm all for NIL. I love NIL. I mean, maybe I'm a little biased because I had NIL, but I love the NIL. But at the same time, I think it has hurt smaller schools, but has helped smaller, not as looked at sports. And I don't mean smaller sports. Like women's basketball now it's taken off, and I love that. I will turn on a women's basketball game before I turn on a men's game because it's so much more fun to watch. But when I say smaller, I say not as well watched sports. As for specific example at Highlands, NIL does not exist.
That's fair.
It's just not a thing.
Yeah, and in the town of Las Vegas,
we're happy if McDonald's is open.
We're happy. We're happy if Sonic's
it's not 24 hours there.
Oh no!
It is not.
Neither is Taco Bell nor Sonic.
That's
your
a rough
food.
world y'all live in.
Vegas is a tough one.
At 7.
There's also pretty much one bar in town. It's Dick's, and there's 3 now.
There's 4 now.
There's 4
now. Well, I wasn't counting Dick's, so yeah, 4. Hey,
yeah. When I was there, it was just Dick's. There was a couple other towny bars, but they were pretty rough.
We have a Japanese bar now.
All right.
But not a 24-hour McDonald's?
But not a 24.
Yes.
Let's start small and then build our way up.
Yeah, no, we have I'm sorry, but when you think of New Mexico, you don't think of like anything other than New Mexico. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they opened this place up, and I was like, oh, that's not going to make it here. I just know it's not. It's one of the hottest bars in town. I'm like, how?
All right.
How?
Hey, let me tell you this though. When I was in college at Highlands, Dick's was pretty much it. And Dick's, you know how it's kind of bigger, larger where the bar area is right now. Well, before, the front section, the first like 30 feet, used to be a bakery. You had to walk through the bakery to get to the bar. You had to walk through the bakery and the bar to get to the restaurant. It was a 3-for-1, but it was the only bar in town that was like playing live music. It was where all the people used to hang out. And it was, good bakery, good food.
But through the bakery would probably feel like the walk of shame. Like you're walking like through this little bakery to go to the bar. It's like heads down, like
walking by. Hey, how's it going? I'll be back for a donut in an hour.
No, here's what's crazier. The bakery closes at 6:00. So if you want to go to the bar after 6:00, which is pretty much whenever everybody goes to the bar, it's dark. You have to walk through darkness just to get to the bar.
If you hear a little kid say, "Come play," don't do it.
I suddenly feel a need to go to this town that I didn't know existed.
Yeah, it's the wrong Vegas. It's the Vegas no slots. That's what we always used to call it. Lindsay, trying to get back on track. Lindsay, talking about NAU and NIL. Were you ever involved in that? Did you ever get to know anything about the collective or anything what that looked like?
Yeah, I mean, it was so different. Like I think NIL hit really like my sophomore year. And that's when I was pretty like knee deep on like the SID side of athletics. So you didn't really hear much. And it was still so new. So like there wasn't a lot of stuff going on. I would say my junior year when I switched to doing ESPN and you just build more of those like personal relationships, you would see like just how it affected. And like when I remember the transfer portal opened my junior year and our QB at the time transferred to Baylor because they offered him some insane NIL package. And it was like, oh, okay. Like that's where you kind of realize like, oh, there is a discrepancy. Like you in Flagstaff, you're in this like mountain town and truly it feels like nothing else exists. And so it was like, oh, like this is normal, not normal. And then I remember my senior year, a basketball player got a deal with Ford and got like a truck out of it.
No.
And I mean, like the popular ones are like Liquid IV. I saw Barstool a lot, just like things like that. Like the smaller ones where you're still bringing in like a little bit of money. But it wasn't anything like what I've seen working at ASU, where I see these girls like these athletes I work with doing it for restaurants and doing it for like larger companies, where we like Waymo, things like that. So, but it's still smaller, kind of how Jay said. Like I do think it's helped the smaller sports, but not the smaller schools. Because I know a lot of players. I know a player that left NAU to go to Boise. Do I know if there was NIL money attached to that? No, but do I know they have more than NAU does? Yes. And NAU isn't a poor school.
Yeah.
Like the alumni that live in Flagstaff, it's not a cheap place to live. Like they've got some money and they donate it well and they're huge like fans and working for them still. Like you get to know all the alumni that have been around for 40, 50 years, but it's just not, they don't have a collective to give. Versus ASU, I've seen it grown so much. And even in the last week since they lost to Texas, like the football team, like the collective has grown by like so much. And it's just like awesome to see them giving back, but it's still not anything compared to an Oregon, a Texas, and Ohio State, you know, like even though they are a big school and they're making a name for themselves, it's not a lot and it's unfortunate. But I mean, my opinion might differ from the broadcast perspective. Like NIL is kind of a bummer. Obviously you want them to get paid. Like I want them to earn what they earn. I'm getting paid to do my job. They deserve to get paid to do theirs, but it takes away like great athletes. And I feel like what's really cool about being at NAU and the FCS level is they're only there to play.
Yeah.
And then it brings in the money and it's like, are you going where you're like, move on to FBS? That's awesome. But are you going for the team you're joining or for the money you're getting?
Yes.
So it's like kind of like a different perspective on it. But I mean, obviously they all deserve to get paid. Like everyone should. You can get injured walking down the street and they could never play again, but at least they'll have, you know, like money to support them when they've never known anything different. But it is a bummer to see like great players. The only reason they're leaving is because a school's offering them more money than a smaller school can offer them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of which, Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, and it seems like, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, just like as I'm watching as a fan, I feel like there's been far more folks sitting out this year than ever in the past. I mean, I understood in the past, people deciding like, hey, am I a prospect to the next level? But even just, I don't know, just whether it's because they're looking at testing the water for a transfer portal, or if they're really deciding that they're going to go for the draft. I just feel like there was a lot of people sitting out of games or playing part of the game. Oh, I'm good. What is it?
Cam Ward.
I'm done. Oh,
Matthew Sluka. Matthew Sluka goes straight to the top of that list. He played in 4 games, which is the max that he can play without burning a year. Didn't get the money that he was apparently promised from one of the coaches. I don't know if it was rumored to be an assistant coach. What's that?
Was that UNLV? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, that was UNLV's quarterback who played his 4 games. Said, I think it was something ridiculous too. It was like $100,000, which to a kid at 22, 21 years old, I understand.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
And I kind of blame UNLV more for that, but also you left your team, and this is what it's doing. This is not college football. This is not college sports. College sports is about camaraderie. College sports is about team and all that stuff. Save the next stuff for the next level, but also get paid. I get it. So here's my suggestion. Here's what I've been kind of sitting on the whole time. I've talked to a couple of my friends about it that are coaching at Division I level and everything. And, I feel like the best way to do it, because we all agree that the smaller sports are starting to thrive, but the smaller schools are not. Well, when a player leaves NAU to go to UW, shouldn't they get a kickback from that? Shouldn't NAU be able to capitalize in some way? So I think financially, what should happen is there should be a pool of money, kind of like the international free agency, where each school at the Power 4 level gets X amount of dollars, and they can max that or not. Because like international free agency, I don't know if you guys know too much about it, but you get a pool of I think it's like $7.5 million, and you can use to max out $7.5 million or go less. So every Power 4 school gets that opportunity to max 7.5, or I'm throwing a number out. It could be a lot more than that if you're trying to really build a national championship winning team. But get a pool like that, and 10% of whatever you pay that player needs to go back to that school. Something to that effect, right? Where the school is actually getting something for it. Because right now they're getting nothing. So even if they were to get it, like Wazoo, they just lost their coach. That should be some money kickback, in my opinion. But also good riddance. But John Mateer leaving, Wayshawn Parker leaving, all these guys are going, and they were phenomenal. No one gave him a chance before. John Mateer was a 2-way player. He was supposed to go to Central Arkansas and play football and baseball. Wazoo said, "No, you're going to be our starting quarterback in 2 years, 3 years, whenever." I think he was a redshirt sophomore. But no, I think these schools, they leave. I think the kickback should be to the school, but also the player should get paid. And to kind of keep that parity, you have a pool. Right now, it's just a free-for-all. Guys are going everywhere, and I don't blame these kids for hopping, skipping, and jumping and going wherever. Get your money, get paid. But if you want to try and hone it in just a little bit, I think being able to put some form of a cap on it, so Alabama's not out there spending $150 million and being the Yankees for 10 years, to kind of mitigate that, have a cap on it, or have a pool that everybody's able to use, and have some of that slough go back to the smaller schools to give them an opportunity to they can use that money for whatever. They can increase their facilities. They can then turn right back around and get a Division II player or FCS player. Now the FCS team gets a slough back, and they get some money back from it. Everyone wins, in my opinion. I know the lower it goes down, the less money that you're going to get, but also they get something versus right now it's nothing. So that's my take. That's my hot plan. I think it would do better than what it would do now. It may not be perfect. There's probably some working things that need to be going on with it.
But there's only one thing I see that's a problem with that, and that is players that commit for the coach. You saw it a lot. I think the number one example you see with that is the one that I think of immediately is Lincoln Riley. When Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma for the USC job, what did a lot of his Oklahoma guys do? They transferred to USC. Caleb Williams is one of those names that transferred to USC because of Lincoln Riley. And now you see, players don't commit for the school.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. I'm sorry. It's the reality. Students go to that school because they want to go to that school because of the education. Athletes do not commit to that school because they have that major or whatever. They commit because of that coach. They trust that coach. They want that coach.
Yep.
So the only thing that I see that's a problem, and I'll cap it at this, is those guys that do transfer because of the coach, now they're getting penalized because their coach jumped and left. That's why I love the transfer portal. Coaches could leave and go wherever they want anytime, but if a player did it, now they got to sit out a year. Now you have the transfer portal. They can jump. The guys that I think you see that you're talking about, Gavin, that they have to get some kickback are the guys that transfer 3, 4, 5 different times. Sorry, buddy, your coach hasn't left 4 times. He's left once or none at all. You're committing because, there's a bag over here and there's a bag over there. That's why you're committing. You're not committing because of the coach.
That's fair.
Or because
that's
he got bit.
and that's yeah. And that's another take on it, right? Like that's a specific situation where I think at that point in time, like let's take the Washington State situation just because I know it very well. Wake Forest gets the head coach Jake Dickert. I think you pay for you pay for the coach, right? Like, okay, we're gonna buy him out and then also give you a little bit of kickback for that. And then any player that's transferring to and from our school, now we don't have to pay for them. Or it's already a set price, right? Like we'll pay $5 million to your program to take your head coach and to get any player that comes this way. That's a workaround. It's not perfected, but I think that yes, partly in that situation, you're not trying to take the player away from the coach just because the coach is trying to improve himself and make his life better. Just another way to just kind of have a workaround. But I agree. When it comes to a coach leaving, as much as it hurt our head coach leaving, I understand. If I had to, work for that president that they have, Schultz, I don't know if I would be very happy either. So understandable. But yeah, I think there should be some sort of clause that's in there where if you get the coach, you can get the players, but at a fixed rate. So it's not robbing them blind and just feeding Wazoo for days, but something along those lines. Yeah, Joel, what's your take on this, man? What do you have in the NIL just the kickbacks to schools, the players just leaving and doing all that stuff? What's your thoughts on if there were a pool of money that a school had, is that something that you would be interested in seeing?
You know what? I would. It makes me think of, of the past and still present, money games. It feels like unless you're a sacrificial lamb, in terms of a smaller school, unless you're like literally going to be like, hey, good luck to our athletes, but at least we're going to build, down the road or right away. I think it would be a safer way to bring back money to those small spaces. So, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I'm trying to think of what you were just saying, Jace, in a situation where it's like a whole group is following along, because it's true. I mean, maybe it's starting to change, but, for the most part, many a times it's not the school that the athlete is chasing, it's the coach. There was a transition from Charleston Southern to temporarily Coastal Carolina, and then eventually elsewhere. I think back to Coastal Carolina. A person that back when it was a recruiter, assistant coach, and is now head coach, Jimmy Chadwell. Now I believe for Coastal, and it was more so. It was that a lot of the players that were at Charleston Southern, and this is again before NIL, they followed suit. They're like, hey, where are you going? Oh, we're going over here. Oh, now we're going to go over there. But there was penalty for transferring. So you said like you have to sit and wait, depending where you were at and how many games you played. So I mean, personally, I feel like yes, I want the players. Again, I lean kind of that way, for them to win. But if there's a separate pool, or but if there's a piece of the pocket, from the players themselves individually, hey, they offered you this much, part of your, part of that deal, X amount % has to come out of that to school that you're ditching. That's I feel like it's fair. I want to also think like you were thinking, Jace, of like where the risk is, because I see the reward. Like, what would be the issue? Outside of even just the players following the coach.
Yeah, I mean, the only schools that you really commit to go to school there for are, let's say, Army, Air Force, Navy, for sure. And then Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Like, hey, hate to break this to you, they ain't going to play sports. They just doing that because that's like their third hobby.
Right.
Like, they are not there for sports. They are there, especially in the military academy, them fools are going to be flying jets.
Right.
And building.
Hey, don't hate on Mike Ford right now.
Hey, I'm not. But they're going to build like they're going to build these UAV thingies. Like, they are not going for sports. They are going purely for the academics. And those are the only schools that you're going to see guys are going to be like, yeah, I'm going to Air Force Academy because I'm going to fly a jet, or I'm going to Harvard to become a lawyer. That's what you're going to see.
Right. Or maybe their parents went to that same school and they're like, I'm going to
Exactly.
keep up the educational. Like that.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that have it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's getting to the hour mark. I'm going to edit this next part out, but I do want to give some closing thoughts. If anybody has some closing thoughts on NIL, on anything that we really touched on today, we'll wrap it up with any closing thoughts. And then what I'll do is, as soon as the last person's done talking, I'll give like an outro, and then I'll click end recording, and then we can kind of debrief for just a couple minutes. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but yeah, think of any last final thoughts, and then we'll go. I'll just do like a quick outro, and then I'm trying to think. So we have our first episode dropping on the 20th. Do you guys think that maybe we could meet again, maybe next week, and do something kind of like this, and just have? Because I like these where we just talk current events, and just give our takes. Kind of like, what's that? It's the show on ESPN, the Hot Takes or whatever, where they just kind of the Four Corners. I can't remember the name of it, but
Around the Horn.
I like Around the Horn.
Yeah.
That's it. Yep. So we can do something like this. I also want to open up the floor to you guys for other things, but yeah, we'll go ahead and is there any final thoughts on today's topics?
I mean, I think we've all as differing as all of our opinions are on NIL, I think we all agree that at the end of the day, it's what's best for the athlete. And I don't know, no matter how hard everyone's trying, if we've found that yet. I mean, we're only on year 4 or 5 of actual NIL, like legalized NIL, where players it's not under the table. It's not, come around and they'll recognize you kind of thing. Like, so I think there's so much more learning and growing to do. And I think it's just going to change so much. Like the way we've seen the transfer portal change, the way we've seen conference realignment change, the playoffs change. I think nothing's going to be set in stone, and we're going to get comfortable with it now, and we're going to blink, and next year it's going to be like, God forbid, a whole new playoff format, or, the Pac-12's now the Pac-16. Like, you don't know, but with NIL, like for the players' sake, I just hope they lock it in soon.
Good point.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's going to change.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I just wonder if it's going to change how coaches, like how they advertise to the next person they're recruiting. Hey, here's this ideal situation. It could be the same for you. Will that come into play? It's going to sound weird, but would you say like an NAU or what have you? Would you say like, hey, we built this player up and now he's over there at Baylor? And he's taking care of himself and his family. Like, do you start to advertise that with the understanding of like, hey, like instead of thinking of this person for X amount of years, it might be X amount of seasons. It might be, hey, we get this person in for, you prove yourself a season or two, and then you continue with us. Fantastic, we have this build, but know that there's opportunities that others before you went and took advantage of. Like, do it's like, I wonder if, like, I know it's not a great closing thought, but I
It's,
wonder if that play is that becoming, like, would that even be a thing?
It's the JUCO model. It's the FCS turning into JUCO.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Exactly what I was
It's a JUCO model. And honestly, the teams that capitalize on it are the teams that are going to win. Because they're going to continue getting good players in and good players out, good players in, good players out. Look at like the good JUCOs do the same thing. Boom, you're in, you're out. Let's get you to the top and let's move on. Well, good. Yeah, for Up West Sports, I'm Gavin. That's Jace. That's Lindsay. That's Joel. Thank you for listening.